Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the New York Symposium. I'm Diane Sayre, LaRouche candidate for U.S. Senate in New York, and today is Friday, May 31st, and we're going to be discussing this 6 weeks of intense work to get myself and Jose Vega on the ballot in the state of New York, with the outrageous tripling of the signature requirements for independent candidates. Before I get to that, I want to say a couple of things about the strategic situation. I know many Americans, many viewers are very angry and upset about what just happened with the Trump trial in Manhattan, the crazy convictions, the kangaroo court, and the seemingly total disregard for any standard of law or justice, clearly trying to drive a presidential candidate who's a former president out of the race. How else can you explain 91 separate indictments, a conviction of 34 felonies for supposedly paying a prostitute hush money, accepting that you paid it from the wrong bank account and didn't count it as a campaign expense or something like this? So everybody knows this wouldn't be going on if he were not running for president. Similarly, not to quite the same extent, you have the situation of Robert Kennedy Jr., who managed, it looks like, to get on the ballot in New York, as did I and Jose, but spent $1.1 million, is experiencing a total blackout in the press and being told that there will be no debates. Now, while many people are saying what's being done to Trump is unprecedented, that's not true. This was done with, in a sense, more debilitating effects when it was done to Lyndon LaRouche in the late 1980s. LaRouche was a presidential candidate. He was not a billionaire, but he had built a support base in the United States through a number of publications, including War on Drugs, Fusion, dedicated to fusion energy, New Solidarity newspaper, the Fusion Energy Foundation, various think tanks. It was his wife, Helga Zepp-LaRouche, who created the Schiller Institute in 1984. And there were hundreds of thousands of Americans who were supporting him, and millions who watched his half-hour infomercials when he ran for president. And in 1986, a couple of his associates won major Democratic Party primaries in Illinois for lieutenant governor and secretary of state, I think. And also, LaRouche had succeeded in the early 80s in recruiting President Ronald Reagan to the idea that we had to stop Kissinger's mutual and assured destruction by developing a laser beam, particle beam defensive system against nuclear weapons. And LaRouche was Reagan's back channel to the Soviet Union. So contrary to what the media would have you believe, he was not a minor figure. He was a towering intellectual giant who was shaping policy. And by 1986, after there was a raid on LaRouche's home of 400 FBI agents, U.S. Marshals. It was covered all over the news. Then two of his associates won these, I guess that was early in the year, won the primary elections. Thousands upon thousands of slanderous articles emerged. They put LaRouche on trial in Boston. The case fell apart. Then they moved the case to Virginia, and they succeeded in getting a jury that was so full of FBI agents that they could not even get them all off the jury using all of the allowed strikes. The foreman of the jury was an FBI agent. The judge in the case was the owner of the largest private gun running company in the world, which used to be the weapons supplier for the CIA. And therefore, not surprisingly, LaRouche and a half dozen or so of his associates were convicted. LaRouche spent 5 years in federal prison, and the former Attorney General, Ramsey Clark, took the case. Now, why am I bringing this up? Because the United States is a presidential system. The President of the United States does have enormous power, even though various of our recent presidents have not either bothered to use it or have been impeded from using it by these kind of political witch hunts and smear campaigns. It is also the case that one of the reasons why you don't often get millions of Americans in the streets is that Americans believe, or believed until recently, that they could change the direction of their nation through the electoral process. But now it seems that that is not the case, that the election process is not respected. And here we are having this absurd clown show when we are actually on the brink of thermonuclear war. If it weren't enough that we have hideous war crimes and genocide being committed on the American dime by the Netanyahu regime in Gaza and now Rafah, but Biden has now said that it would be acceptable for Ukraine to use American military supplies, weapons, ammunition, technology that we are giving Ukraine, and targets to strike deep inside of Russia, including the recent targeting of the Armavir early radar detection site and another such radar detection site. And as we saw today on the International Peace Coalition call, Ted Postal provided maps showing the coverage of these radars, that these detection systems allow you as much as 5 to 7 more minutes to make a decision as to whether an attack really has been launched, whether you really need to retaliate. This is why, of the very few cases where Russia said using a nuclear weapon was a response that they would consider, among them is damaging the ability for Russia to launch a second strike, for Russia to respond. So unlike the United States, which has not ruled out first use of nuclear weapons, Russia says they will not use nuclear weapons first unless there is an existential threat to the survival of Russia, which this would be. Now, why is this occurring? Well, Biden has hung his hat on the success of Ukraine, the victory of Ukraine against Russia. I don't know whether he really believes that or that is just the disinformation campaign that he is being fed. But at any rate, Ukraine losing is something that he doesn't want to have happen before the November elections. And the problem he has is that Ukraine has lost the war. And even if we send them tons of weapons, they don't have the manpower to use them. And I don't think there's a great appetite for sending American ground troops into Ukraine. So there are various other crazy initiatives where there's a lot to risk. So in the midst of such a dangerous strategic situation, instead of having robust debates among candidates for federal office and presidential candidates about how to avert nuclear war, what is your peace plan? What is your plan for the United States to become a stable, strong player for stability and peace in the world? Something that presidential candidates should be talking about, we're treated to a disgusting clown show that's got everyone diverted from the actual subject. So from that standpoint, I wanted to talk about this petitioning, the good, the bad, and the ugly, with a few veterans of the petitioning campaign, because on the one hand, like the sanctions which Biden and others imposed on Russia, the onerous requirement of getting 45,000 valid signatures, meaning we had to go well over that in my case we filed approximately 70,000 signatures, meant that we had to talk to hundreds of thousands of people. Well, that's not a bad thing for a candidate or a campaign to do. However, the downside of that is when you are petitioning, you do not have time to have long conversations or arguments. You have to get people to sign or not sign and quickly move on to the next person. So that was the downside of it. And of course, it's absurd when Republicans and Democrats each only need 15,000. And I won't say only because I think 15,000 is onerous as well. And I think there should be a much different qualification for ballot access, but I'll leave it there. And I would like to introduce my fellow candidate for federal office, Jose Vega, who is running for U.S. Congress in CD 15 in the Bronx, Michelle Aaron, who was a volunteer with my campaign, Petitioning, and also Cindy Timmel, who was heading up the effort up in Buffalo, New York, who's joining us by phone. And I guess, Jose, why don't we go to you, but others can certainly jump in as you feel to share your thoughts on this entire situation and the petitioning and what you found among the people that you were talking to.
Yeah, well, sure. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on, Diane. It's always a pleasure to be on your show, and also petitioning for you. In fact, I've got your hat here, which I'll be wearing for the rest of the program here. In fact, actually, I have to adjust it. I recently got a haircut, so now I don't need it so tight or so loose anymore. But here we go. It's good. Well, actually, it's kind of fiddly. So on the petitioning side of things, and actually, having to deploy people to petition. First of all, yeah, my requirements were not as ridiculous as yours. We needed 3,500 valid signatures in a congressional district, despite the fact that the Democrats needed about 1,200 valid signatures if they wanted to put their name on the ballot, and Republicans needed even less, 940. All right, because supposedly they try to be proportional to how many registered Republicans there are in the district compared to, I don't know, I guess how many people are actually in the district. I needed 3,500 valid signatures, and I said very publicly, just before the petitioning started, that we needed to get 10,000 signatures in 10 days. That's what we were saying, and people heeded the call. People flew in from Missouri, people flew in from Ohio. We got people from New York, from the Bronx. Some people took time off to help me petition, and by golly, we did it. It took us a little longer than 10 days, but we met our goal. We met our goal, and people were really happy to hear that we met our goal. You also realize how kind of there's as Diane was saying, there's a benefit to it, and there's also not a benefit to it. Because in the Bronx, especially, people want to know what you're doing. People want to know who you are. People want to know, well, okay, Jose, they're seeing you every day, especially if you're doing like the same neighborhood, because it's in the Bronx, right? And if you're doing the same section of a neighborhood, you get people who, see you every day. And at some point they come over and they say, okay, what are you actually doing here? I think my most interesting experience was being out at a supermarket, and I had a woman come up to me and say, like, you're running for Congress? You're lying. You're lying. You're lying. This has to be some lie. And I was honestly like, I didn't know how to take that. And the person was just so adamant that I was lying that they even came back later and or like quizzing me on basic, questions on, well, how do you become a candidate? How much money do you have to raise before you have to, report to the FEC? Did you do this? Did you do that? And I was just like, I mean, you don't believe that I would be a candidate? Now, maybe I was looking a little weird that day. I mean, I don't know. It was maybe like good 3 weeks into the petitioning, and like you get into this habit of waking up really early and going to sleep late, and you have bags under your eyes and you're stressed. Yeah, I guess maybe, but yeah, and I don't look like any other candidate. That's true. But you know, other than that, I mean, meeting people who were recognizing me every day, who, I wish I would be able to have longer and more engaged discussion with, but it's like I have to get 100 signatures. Um, and I think what Diane did, especially given, and of course we helped Diane get her signatures as well. Some of us were double petitioning in the Bronx. So not only were we asking for people to sign my petition, we would then flip the clipboard over and say, now, would you also sign for my friend Diane Sayre, who's running for US Senate? We were very clear and explicit what they were signing for, as opposed to some other campaigns that got into hot water for not being clear and obscuring who they were signing for. And most of the time it worked. Some of the times I would get this thing where people would say, I'm only signing for you, man. I'm not signing for anybody else. Where is this lady? If she wants my signature, where is she? And I'd say, I don't know, probably Albany or Buffalo. What is she doing all the way up there? Well, she needs like 45,000 ballot signatures compared to my 3,500. So, and she has to be in the entire state. So people are like, Jesus, all right, well, I'm going to sign on that principle alone that she needs so many damn signatures. Um, I think what we did, Diane, especially, in terms of your campaign, I think what people didn't realize 2 years ago that people are really feeling now is the requirements for a statewide ballot access, right? Because this year is a presidential year. And as we saw with the Jill Stein campaign, who publicly reported that they didn't even meet the minimum threshold, and she did make an excellent point, which was that the only other person other than yourself, Diane, to have reached the goal, the petitioning goal, and excel at it was somebody who had, used their running mate who recently divorced a tech billionaire to fund the campaign. And I believe they were even reporting paying people $90 an hour, which, I mean, what am I doing running for Congress? I could like live off that for a year or two, doing that. But it goes to show that there's a
Count,
lot of
actually, Jose, we should count all the money that we didn't spend
all the money we
and
didn't spend.
report it as a profit. Report it as campaign donations to the
Oh,
FEC. Now I'll
don't give
probably
the
go to
FEC
jail
ideas.
for saying that. I know, I know.
Don't give the FEC ideas. But yeah, I just think I'll kind of leave it here. When people talk about grassroots mobilization and that we need, bottom up this and that, and the people have to actually bring it. Well, we showed we can do it. We didn't pay anybody to do it. We didn't have to pay our way onto the ballot. We just did it with real people power because people also flew in from around the country for Diane's campaign too. More people flew in for Diane's campaign than they did for my campaign, right? And we mobilized people. It was tough at times, and we did it. We did it twice now. And now everybody wants to complain about how bad, the New York State ballot laws are, which they are. They are fascist. They are draconian. They are terrible. But we showed that real grassroots power, real people power can actually overcome any situation that may seem insurmountable. We did that with the petitioning, and I think we're going to have some surprises along with this campaign, with these campaigns as well as to what we can do with real organized people power. So I'll leave it there.
Great. Michelle, and I know Cindy is here as well, but Michelle, go ahead.
Okay. Well, I'm going to start with something that happened today, which is I was speaking to a friend who has been certainly aware of the petitioning campaign, but someone who I thought would have been very emotional about the Trump verdict. And I started trying to brief the person on some he didn't care. He wasn't interested. He wanted to know what had happened with the filing for Diane and Jose. Diane, you and I were in the city when the Trump verdict came in, and there were all of about 4 people who tried to let up a big cheer in this park. Not very impressive. So people, I think, are very moved that these campaigns are actually doing something. And something that came up a lot is when you would convey this outrageous 45,000 signature requirement. Not everyone, but an awful lot of people would would just be in shock that that is what's being required here. If anyone who's listening hasn't had the great opportunity to petition before, consider that on a good day, a good petitioner, maybe you're thinking 100 signatures. How many signatures are you going to get over 6 weeks if you quit work, quit your kids, quit your dog? I had this one instance where a woman, I told her, I checked, are you a registered New York voter? Yes, great. Can you sign for my friend Diane to get on the ballot? We have to get an outrageous 45,000 signatures. The woman asks, okay, what are her positions? And I said, I can't tell you because it's 45,000 signatures. We'll never get them all. And she said, oh, okay, I'll sign. And so she was perfectly you'd think I didn't answer her question. We're always concerned. Well, you have to answer the question that was asked. Lyndon LaRouche would always say, you have to figure out what's the actual question that they're asking. So, anyway, I did have the opportunity to petition in a lot of different places. Long Island, something fun there was we often were doing the same place repeatedly, and it almost became like a social phenomena. I think you had something similar in the Bronx, where people would say, I did that, I've gotcha, or they might even flash the little palm card. We had a little card with information to get on the website and such that we would give to people. So it was like a badge that people would flash at you. I'm in the club. And yeah, it's kind of heartbreaking that we didn't have time to talk to so many people. But maybe we'll be able to go back to some of these places. I also did a bunch of petitioning in Manhattan, a bunch of different places where you get, Manhattan's a broad place. Inwood was delightful, very fun. But you get to the Upper East Side, Upper West Side, and you have people who have a bit higher sense of themselves. And I would say a little bit more of a commitment to the two parties than perhaps other places. So it was on the Upper West Side that you might have a number of people who were so committed to their particular party that they would or wouldn't sign. So anyway, I started calling out much more about Diane, sign for Diane to go against Gillibrand, because at least it cut to the chase much more quickly. They would either run screaming away, no, she's my candidate, or they would say, yes, against Gillibrand, I'll sign. Just a couple other little, and I could just leave it there. People who, so other parts of the state, Rockland County, other places where I was able to deploy, people are not so interested in their parties. They're thrilled when you say it's an independent candidate. I think we had this just about everywhere. People much more interested, an independent, okay, I'll sign. And even something I noticed among people in their late 20s and 30s who probably haven't seen a lot of great candidates in their lifetime, that when I would try to get them to stop and come sign a petition, they didn't want to stop. So I would call out to their retreating back, it's to put an independent on the ballot. Stop, turn around, come back. An independent, okay, and they would sign. So that happened a lot with a slightly younger demographic. But the one last thing I want to indicate that would probably be a good lead into Cindy is how happy people who participated in the effort were to participate. Even if it was a bad day in a particular way, or I don't know, maybe a good day, but so happy. I know one person who just on their own gathered some signatures, and they handed them to me when we met, and they said, you know, here's my 35 I managed to collect. I'm so sad that it's so little against this 45,000, but I said, hey, you know, coincidentally, that put us over our goal for the day, eh? But people were just very happy to be able to act. It can be difficult to figure out what to do about the big mess. So I think people were very happy to participate in the process.
Great. Well, let's go to Cindy, if you're there.
All right. How was my voice? Can you hear me all right?
I can.
Excellent. So it's interesting, even though I'm upstate, I had similar experiences to Michelle. And I would like to talk about the happy component, and I'm going to end with that because I always like to end on a high note. I found it interesting. This is kind of what Diane was talking about, that, you know, we're not debating, like we should be talking about things. There's so many important things to talk about, and people were quite disenfranchised, and there was different levels of disenfranchisement. So some people, and there was one time where I had 6 people in a row who were not even registered to vote. And 4 of them were young, like 20s and 30s, and a couple were in their possibly 60s. And they were like, no, I'm not registered to vote. And they were telling the truth. They weren't just lying to get off the hook or anything. And it was so sad that these people just don't even want to participate. So that would be the most benign part, the lower end of the spectrum. And then the next level would be people who were, you know, really just annoyed with the whole system, and they didn't want to participate, and you were bothering them, and they just wanted to go put their head in the sand, or maybe, I don't know, buy some more food or something and watch a marathon on TV. But then the next level were people who were very, very irate, to the point of being very angry, and they hated the politicians, and it was so corrupt, and they didn't want anything to do with it, and nobody could help them, and they were just so disgusted. And this is where I was ready to offer them hope, and I had to tread very lightly, and I, you know, maybe literally even like backed away a step, and I said, well, listen, I'm not going to ask you to sign, but I just need you to know that Diane is different. She's been saying the same thing for 30 years, and she has a plan, and she's an independent, and she's not saying the same narrative that the Uniparty is saying. And then they would stop, and they would listen, and I would calm them down, and I would offer them hope. And I mean, it was amazing just for some of them, because they didn't think there was any hope that was out there. And sometimes they would sign, and sometimes they wouldn't, you know, and most of the time they would take the palm card, but at least I offered them a chance for something to get them back. And I told a couple people, I said, listen, they don't want you to be involved. This is their plan, that you're angry and disenfranchised and disillusioned and full of despair, and you're falling right into their hands. And sometimes that would wake them up a little bit. So that was an interesting thing that I would, you know, find in different pockets. But I found that the thing that maybe was my key to success was just being very disciplined. You know, like starting off by looking forward to going, and you know, you're getting out there, and you know, you're on this hot pavement, and it's 85 degrees, and the sun is beating down on you. I actually prefer the cold. And then you would have maybe 5 signatures, and you think, oh my gosh, how am I going to, you know, spend 6 hours out here today? And then before you know it, you've got your sheet of 10 filled up, and it's actually a perfect sheet. And then you make a goal for yourself, well, I'm going to get like, you know, 6 more of these, you know, perfect 10 sheets. And you just keep going, and you have this great attitude, and it's that discipline. And then when you come home and you realize what you've done, you feel a sense of accomplishment. You feel really good. And you go to bed at night, you sleep well, and you get up the next day, and then you want to do it again. And so you can take the negativity, because the power of the good overcomes the hardship of it. And that's what I found happened to me. And it was this ideal, this ideology of doing something great for humanity, and not just New York State, but the United States and for the world, this bigger picture that, I mean, I kind of went through withdrawal. I had a really hard time. I'm still trying to disengage. I look at the clock every night at 8 o'clock saying, oh, I got to go on the petitioner Zoom call, and it doesn't exist anymore. So I would say that that's part of that positive energy, that when you you're walking, offering, Diane as a solution, as a hope, there's something out there, and you incorporate that within yourself, it just gives you this courage and this motivation to just trudge through all the negative and just feel really good about what you did, and being part of this great team, that we're just all trying to make a difference in the world. And that's the high ideal that, I don't know, makes me just really happy that I could do this. So that was my success, I think.
Thanks. That does remind me of a few patterns to report. And also, there were cases, and I'm sure everyone can think of a few of them, where people, you might get it more as the candidate, where you have a sense that people really were despairing until they spoke with you, and then suddenly they said, oh my gosh, at least finally someone understands what I'm talking. I met a woman like that when I was at the Tulip Festival in Albany, and we were talking about I forget what's happening in the schools or something like that. And she said, I can't believe, I thought I was crazy. No one else thinks that this destruction is deliberate. I can't believe you're saying this. And then she said, and I'm personally going through a terrible time with one of my children who is dealing with drug addiction. And you just got that sense. Also, a few people on the Upper West Side in Manhattan who were very anguished about the Gaza situation. The kind of upper crust Jewish New Yorker who wants to be loyal to Israel or feels immense pressure to do that, but sees what is being carried out by Netanyahu and is horrified and knows that you cannot get peace by slaughtering children. And these people also were very relieved to hear, oh, ceasefire. Oh, you do care about the hostages. I care about everybody, the hostages, the prisoners, the Palestinian prisoners in Israel. There has to be a way out of this that isn't based on revenge. The other thing that happened on two different occasions, and I have to say, Cindy, you're such a good example, because I was not always as disciplined as I might have been and found myself on kind of a short fuse sometimes. People who say, well, let me think, very often the ones who said, well, I want to know what you stand for, could talk to you for a half an hour if you would allow them, which I would never do. And then they wouldn't sign, because really they were just looking for the one thing on their laundry list that they could disagree with as an excuse for not signing. Then other people who said they would research. So this is the card Michelle was talking about. And it's the size of a bookmark. And then the back side of it, let us beat swords into, plowshares. And there's a quote from Lyndon LaRouche, which is from 4 days after 9/11, where he's in a webcast and he says, on the record of history, wars and similar operations conducted for the purpose of revenge or retribution are the most stupid policies any government or its people have ever conducted. The blowback of such policies has destroyed repeatedly the very nations which launched such policies. Let us stop being stupid now. And then it says Lyndon LaRouche, September 15th, 2001. In two cases at two different grocery stores, I had someone come by and say, oh, I don't know, but they took the card and then they came back to sign. And in both cases, they were veterans. And one was a disabled Vietnam War veteran who was quite handicapped, who drove up in his car to tell me out the window because it was so difficult to get out, okay, I want to sign your petition. And I found those cases particularly moving because in this country we have about 2.8 million Americans who have served in Iraq, Afghanistan, and these wars since 9/11. It's a very large number. we have between 20 and 22 soldiers committing suicide on any given day. This is a group of Americans who have not been treated well, whose goodwill has been abused. And if we can do something that helps them to have a voice, that's very important.
I think I'll add on to that, Diane. On the despair question, yeah, I think I could see it, especially in the Bronx, and a lot of the people who were petitioning for me could see it when we would say, hey, can you sign? I would say, can you help get me on the ballot, or somebody next to me, can you help get my friend on the ballot? He's running for Congress. One of the responses you get, Congress against who? And then I would say, Richie Torres, give me that thing right now. I am signing. Right. I think that is an expression of the desperation because people do not like Richie Torres. Oh, I'm gonna help you. Give me four more of your palm cards. I'm gonna tell this to everyone. I'm gonna point people your way. I hope you get, a million signatures. Um, the other form of desperation I got, which I kind of mentioned in the beginning of my little, talking about the petitioning, was this lady who just could not believe that I was running for Congress. Because well, she just said, there's just no way you could be running for Congress. Why would you be running for Congress? You're lying. And I posed to her, is it so wrong to think that a 25-year-old from your community would want to run for Congress because they think they can make things better? And she just said, yes. I don't know anybody your age who cares remotely about this country at all. And but she was so sincere about it. She wasn't and I showed her my palm card, which I don't have any on me right now, but I showed her my palm card. I was like, you think I would go through the trouble of printing thousands of these little things and getting hats, okay, that say Vega for Congress on them? And she just said, you're scamming people somehow, you know, and I said, oh, there we go. There you go. There's my, yeah, like I would go to the trouble of getting thousands of those printed and you know, so, and yeah, she just drove away. I want to share one thing, which is from 2 years ago of the petitioning that I will never forget, which is when I was on the corner of 125th Street in Lexington and I was petitioning for you, Diane, in Harlem. And uh I was just on this corner and there was somebody who was slumped over, right? I guess they were high on fentanyl or something, and they were just like zombie-like. Their head was where their knees were, and they were standing. And then I see somebody who's maybe in their mid to late 50s recording the person. Okay. And then the person who's recording the person who's overdosed comes to me and says, excuse me, I don't know how these phones work. Can you help me share this video with my son? And I said, okay. And so, I help him send the video to his son. He says, great. Yeah, he needs to see what his brother has become so he doesn't do that as well. And you know, I was like, oh, that's also your son. And then he just grabs his son by the arm, who's still slumped over in half, and he's like basically dragging him home. He says, come on, let's go. We got to get you cleaned up. And I just I had to stop petitioning because I was just bawling. I was like, this is his reality. This is the reality for many Americans and New Yorkers around the country right now, right? Um, and that right there just really reaffirmed everything I was doing for you, Diane, in the campaign. And I just said, the this is just so depraved that, especially in that district, which is right next to mine, it's the Congressman Espaillat has allowed open air drug trading. I mean, these are the people who run our government right now, where they want people like that just to fill the streets. And so yeah, so I mean, that's just a story that's going to stay with me forever, but it was something that I witnessed being in the streets petitioning for you, you know, and now the petitioning has kind of, it allows us to remind Americans that there is another option. And so, yeah.
Well,
So,
there's a shocking, it's just like, it just well, it makes you feel awful. This irony when you meet, this happens a bunch in the Manhattan area, where someone will be stepping by people begging because they have no other option, and then turn around and tell you the economy is greater than it ever was. And in fact, one guy who I was having this disagreement about the economy suddenly goes, "Wait a second, you're with LaRouche. Take my signature off." Because he knew that LaRouche wouldn't have any of this. But just it's a bit of a backtrack, but what Diane was saying reminded me that one of the biggest litmus tests for whether someone was good enough to sign our petition was on the question of peace. As your palm card actually highlights that, taking nuclear war off the table, the swords to plowshare idea. And oftentimes, if someone said, you know, what are Diane's issues? I would start with that. Saving us from nuclear war, peace, and many people would, like, tension just suddenly dropped and they would want to sign. And then if somebody would be confused, excuse me, what do you mean by peace? Could you explain this peace to me? I don't understand. You went through a few of those and you realized that they weren't going to sign. So
They say peace, but I think we need, in effect, they didn't put it this way, but it was like saying, well, I think that we do need to kill some people, don't we? It was just awful.
I saw when we were filing at Albany up the street, I was there a little early and I got a chance to walk around a bit. And there's a statue of George Washington, great military commander, much more brilliant than the British he worked with during the French and Indian War. And what is with him in this statue? It's in Albany at the state capitol. He has his sword, he has a plow. There's a life-sized plow behind him because he was a citizen farmer. Someone who, when there's no need for war, you would go back to a situation of peace.
On the LaRouche question, my favorite thing was I'm always intimidated by like real New Yorkers, like people who talk like this. And there was this older gentleman, not super older, early 50s, late 40s maybe. He's like, "You want me to sign for who? Diane say yeah, what is she, a Republican? Because I lean more Republican." Oh, LaRouche. And like he would pause after saying LaRouche. And I get nervous whenever anyone says that because it's like I don't know how they're about to react. Says, "Yeah, I'll sign. I love LaRouche. I followed him a lot. I listened to him a lot in the 90s. It was fucked up what they did to him. They put him in prison. That's terrible. Yeah. No, it's just oh, and if you could just sign there. Yeah. No, I'm good. There was a LaRouche person 2 years ago, right? Yeah, it's her. Oh, it's her. Oh, yeah. That's right. Yeah. All right. Well, listen, I wish you the best of luck and good luck, I guess. So, it's that to me is like, what? Because I'm not old enough with these people, and I don't know what the LaRouche phenomenon was like in the 80s and 90s, and to see these relics of
I miss him. So many people miss him.
I was just blown away by that.
Cindy, did you have more?
Yeah, I wanted to say that I got to have a little insight into Lyndon LaRouche and some of the things that he stood for, and it was so heartwarming. Just his whole concept, of education and how creativity is so important, and you need to teach people not the answer, but teach them how to process and come to the answer on their own. And just listening to his views, it makes so much sense that, I just feel like I want to educate, people because they've been so misinformed and they're believing, they've been Wikipedia'd, which is a term that I've kind of made up for people who believe just, whatever they go to their search engine and it tells them. but they're not really finding the truth. I also would like to say that I think the most, I don't know, enlightening, encouraging part for me on this whole journey for the last 6 weeks was talking to the people who found that, you know, we had something in common, and we could really talk about our love for the country and how we wanted to make it better. And they were surprised that somebody was out there fighting for them. They thought they were all by themselves. You know, they might be the only one in their family, or maybe there's like 3 or 4 of their friends, and they haven't really been able to have any conversations. And they were just so excited that there was somebody out there who really wanted to make America a place where we could really value humanity. And so those were just very heartwarming. And I know I've got a lot of names of people that I can contact in the future, and people who are just really interested to help out. So it was quite a journey. It was very different than it was, you know, 2 years ago. In a way, it was harder, but again, it's just the harder you work, the sweeter the victory is at the end. And because we did even better this time around, we were more organized. I just feel like we have more strength. I really feel there's a greater chance for us, because so many people know about Diane, and so many people are independent, which shocked me. And so many people want change. And even somebody who was a Democrat was so happy to sign for her. He says, "I'll never vote Democrat again. I'm so disgusted with everything that's happening. And I've been a Democrat my entire life." So we're just finding from all angles, people really want change. Some people are still asleep. They're never going to probably wake up. But there's a great deal of people who are really ready to do something different. And I think that bodes very well for us in this campaign.
I agree. I think that's a really good place to wrap up. I just would say that no one should get too comfortable, because both of our campaigns have to break out, smash through the sound barrier, the glass ceiling, or whatever you want to say, the media blackout. So there is a lot to come, including banners, fundraisers, oh yes, singing. Michelle's holding up our packet of music that everyone's going to be learning, and tours all over the state. So Cindy, get ready. Be doing some more organizing in the not too distant future. And Jose, if you want to say anything about your plans, I should tell everybody that both of us are now past our objection deadlines, and I would say that we are both on the ballot. So
Yay!
yeah.
Yay! Yay! Yay!
Yeah, as of tonight. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yes, barring some desperate, crazy last-ditch move, which will be far worse for our enemies than it is for us. But Jose, anything you want to say in wrapping up?
I just think our campaigns are coming at a very important time right now in history, because this could really be the end of history. I mean, I know we say there is no end of history, but blowing up the entire human race is certainly a way to assert it. And I mean, given the fact that the Russians are, that the Ukrainians are blowing up the Russians' early detection radar systems for nuclear bombs. And now the United States and NATO have basically said, yeah, Ukraine, you can use our weapons and strike into Russian territory. And then Zelensky goes on Twitter and says, thank you so much. Now we can definitely win the war. And then Adam Kinzinger posting on CNN an opinion piece saying people need to grow up and stop being afraid of escalation to nuclear war, because the title of his piece was opinion time to call Putin's bluff. And he says, every time we've armed Ukraine, there's never been an escalation. So won't be any different than any other time before. So we should just, nuclear strike Russia. Well, he didn't say that exactly. Let me not exaggerate. But he said that we should basically escalate the war however we want. I think now's the time to mobilize. I do. And I think if there was ever a time to demand anything from your elected officials, it's to demand that they stop funding the Ukrainian war right now, and get them to realize that they are funding the end of humanity as we know it. You know, I mean, I know everyone loves AOC and Jamal Bowman when it comes to Israel and Gaza, but boy, are they terrible when it comes to actually going after the military industrial complex. And I think we should push them to actually fight and actually be pro-peace and anti-war.
Yep, I agree. Well, thank you, everyone. Thanks for your good work. There is more good work to come. So rest a little, be healthy, listen to Beethoven and fortify your spirit for the next phase. And it's never wrong to send money to me or Jose. We both need a lot of it for the next phase.